Once again, welcome. It's a great to enjoy tonight. I think I'll introduce first what we're going to do last. Urban brought some of his brother seminarians out with him, and 3 of them are from Vietnam, right? So we might be saved like a few minutes at the end to have them tell us about the church in Vietnam. 2 of the 3 are going to get ordained and go back to Vietnam, right? Is that correct? And then 1 studying for Chicago. So let's see, it's Joseph and Vincent and
Thuan.
Paul? Thuan. So Thuan, would you stand up? So you're no, stand up. Stand up. You're doing great. Now, are you studying for Chicago, or are you going back to Vietnam?
Yes, I did study for Chicago.
Chicago. Thank you for coming. And then Joseph.
He's taking a phone call.
Okay. Vincent? So Vincent, you're studying for Vietnam, right?
Studying for the Archdiocese of Hanoi in Vietnam.
Hanoi, wow. So we'll be very interested to hear your stories too. And Joseph is also studying for Hanoi?
He's my classmate. So.
And did your bishop send you here?
Yeah, my former Archbishop sent us here.
Wonderful. Well, we might have a couple of questions for you at the end. Okay? Now, okay, that's the end, but we're very glad you're here. Welcome to you, young men. It's good to have you. Welcome. Welcome. And now to the main event. And as I was saying, it's really 2 parts, because Elizabeth is going to speak to us tonight mostly about her brother, and tomorrow night about the Eucharist. But there's a lot of her brother in the Eucharist too. If you know her life, you know how intertwined those are. So it's really kind of a 2-part deal. 7 o'clock tonight and 7 o'clock tomorrow night. We have Elizabeth brought with us for us these beautiful holy cards of her brothers. If you didn't get them, there's some here and some over on the other table. You're welcome to them. Elizabeth is the youngest of 10, right? 10 children. And I think she's about 20. She's got the energy of a 20-year-old. So, she is just an incredible blessing, an incredible grace. Tonight she's going to speak with us mostly about her brother. And will you have time for questions too, Elizabeth?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, we can ask her questions too. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Elizabeth Van Thuan.
I don't know that the mic works. Does it work?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Because I really can't stand this, Monsignor, because I'm short, and sometimes it goes this way or the other way, and you know.
No, it's working fine.
But anyway, I really thank you for having me here, because the important thing about the story of the love of God is that you have to keep on talking about the love of God. And so tonight, it's not so much about my brother, but it's about what the love of God has done to transform his life, you know. So we put aside him, but put in front of us is what God and his love has transformed his life. And it gives, a gathering like this reminds me of a day when he was getting ready to go to preach someplace or to share a story of his life someplace, and it was really raining really hard in Sydney, Australia, and my parents were in their 90s at that time, and so they were getting ready to go too, and Mom was getting ready with umbrella and Dad with the walker and everything. And so Francis turned to them and say, "Oh, you've listened to me so many times, why do you bother to come tonight? You know, I mean, stay home and stay in the warm." And my mom turned to him and said, "I didn't come to listen to you. I'm coming to pray for you." Because for Mom is always, you need to pray so that what you say reaches the hearts of other people and help them get closer to God. And so tonight, as we are together, we pray that God is among us and that the story with a man like us, like you and me, can transform us because he has been transformed. So here it is. We, like most family in Vietnam, the seminarians can tell you, we always very big family. I don't know about now under the communist regime, but before it's always 7, 8, 9 or 10. So our family comes 10 children, and I'm the last, and Francis is the second eldest. And our eldest brother, his name is Thuan, meaning in Vietnamese springtime. It describes the spring of a new married couple, mom and dad. But Thuan died at the age of 2. At that time, it was a lot of epidemic of malaria and all of these things. And so in their suffering and grief and absolutely devastation, they promised to God, it seems as if they make a deal with him and said, well, if we have another son or more children, we will offer them to the church, And God is smart enough. He said, okay, you say that, you're going to get one, So then the second one came Francis. And my parents always said that my grandfather, my paternal grandmother's father had died at that time. So my paternal grandmother lived with my mom and dad and with all of us. I wasn't born then. And so my grandmother really spoiled that second grandson rotten. I mean, my mom said rotten. I mean, anything that is good, Francis had first before my other sisters and brothers, because he's the second grandson. And it was like, they named him Thuan because they remember that they did make a deal with God. So Thuan means in agreement with your will, all right? And so when he grew up, Mom always reminded him every day, and we blame Mom all the time. We said, Mom, the way he became so holy, because you pay more attention to him than to us, because you make a deal with him, but for us it's like, So anyhow, well, we just said we are just like, yesterday potatoes, right? So anyhow, but so Mom said that every day before he started his day to go to school or anything, Mom would sit him down and say, Francis, you remember, your life is a gift. So then today, whether you play or eat or study or whatever, you always would pay attention to the presence of God in your life and thank Him for your life. And one day He may call you and you have to have good listening ears on. So Francis said, every day Mom say that, and every day, as soon as he was able to walk a long distance, Mom would wake him up at 5 o'clock in the morning. In Vietnam, Mass started very early because it's too hot and people have to go to the farms and all that. So 5 o'clock, Mom would wake him up and the two of them hand in hand would walk to the church. And so he always said that was the most beautiful period of his life, that the biggest school or the most important school was on the knees of Mom and Grandma, that he learned about what Jesus is for him, a friend for him. And so he was growing up very frail all the time, because the rest of us would be climbing trees or playing in the sand, in the dirt, or whatever. Grandma doesn't pay attention, you can get hurt, it's okay. But Francis was always protected. Oh, you don't go out there because too many mosquitoes, or, name it. So anyhow, my bigger brothers, the other one coming after Francis, said to me, oh yeah, well, he was the only grandchild in the house. The rest of us is forgotten, you know. So at 13 years old, he decided that he wanted to go to seminary. Well, apparently, I wasn't born, so I wouldn't know, but I heard that it was a big family reunion and everybody was praying and thanking God, but at the same time worrying, because seminaries of those days were very, I don't know about now, the seminaries in Vietnam, I can't say, but in those days, apparently the food was awfully bad, because it was in the middle of Second World War. Because Francis was born in 1928, so plus 13, that will be in the middle of Second World War. And so the seminarians malnourished, it's the word, plain and simple. And they would sleep on very small wooden beds and all of that. So grandmother was very worried about it. And my mother said that any grandmother here would understand that. My mother said the day that he had to leave for seminary, my grandmother said to him, okay, Thuan, you go out there with Dad and go to take the boat to go along the river to arrive to that seminary. Don't look back as you pass that front door, don't look back, because if your mother and I are crying, and you may lose your vocation, right? So Francis said, I still remember that, and Dad and me, we just walked through that door and we never looked back. And the rector of the seminary forbade my grandmother to send food over. And he said, do not send good food over, because this is the training. He has to be like everybody else, you know. So when I grew up and Francis was already a priest, I asked him, so what is it that you ate that it's so terrible in the seminary? And he said, one boiled egg, and it's not chicken egg, it's duck egg, so it's a little bigger. One boiled egg, cut it into four for 4 seminarians, growing age, with a bowl of rice, and that was it. And or some other time it would be pickled vegetable, and yeah, he's over there, he does like this. Pickled vegetable and fish sauce with a bowl of rice, you know, and no dessert. Who's talking about dessert here, you know, and just water. But he said, and this is so sweet to know this, because I'm a grandmother now. Although Monsignor doesn't think I am, but Monsignor, I'm a grandmother, and I really understand the role of grandmother for the grandchildren. You know how you nurture that. And Francis said, every time that I'm about to lose my vocation because life is so hard, I remember how much grandma holding me on her knees and recite the rosary, praying for vocation. And he said, grandmother never learned how to read or to write. My grandmother didn't know how to read nor write, but she's learned by heart the Hail Mary and the Our Father and the Glory Be, and she did that for vocation. And Francis said, I never forgot how nice it was to sit on grandmother's knees and recite the rosary, and that kept him going for the seminary. So life was pleasant enough. He was very good at school, became a priest in 1953. He was very intellectually smart and intelligent, and so they sent him to Rome. But before sending him to Rome, they wanted him to be learning how to be a parish priest. So he went to a parish of a French those days, I don't know that you know much about the history of Vietnam, but we were under the colonization of Vietnam, of French, for a long time. So the church also was built by the French. And so most of our parish were guided or directed by French priests, most of them. And so he went to the parish, and the parish is St. Francis Xavier Parish, your favorite saint, right? And so this French priest looking at him and said, "Oh my God, I'm old. I'm asking the bishop to give me somebody strong, but he sent me, this frail, skinny priest, you know. I mean, who is going to work here, me or you? Or I have to work for me and you both." So he said, "Listen, I don't really want you to do many masses or prepare homilies, but I like you to take care of the lepers and the prisoners. So you will be the chaplain of the prison and of the leprosy." And he said, "You know, God prepares you, and you don't even know that he prepares you for later days." He didn't know that he was going to end up in prison, but he was prepared to be a chaplain for prisons. And so later on, when we asked him, what do you go there? You know, what do you talk to them? They were murderers or whatever. And you go there and you talk about Jesus? I mean, wouldn't they really listen? Or what do you think that they would, how would they react to you? How did they react to you? And he said, "No, I was there just a presence there of love. And to listen. I just listened to all their angers. They swear, they are angry, and you just listen. And to bring them some hope that someone is listening." And later on I said, "And how about the leprosy?" He said, "Well, nobody touched these people because of the contagious thing. But they love to be touched. And so if you take care of yourself so that you don't have any open sore, you can touch them. You can make sure that they know that God is on love and that they are also love, you know." And so he did that ministry for 2 years, chaplain of the prisons and of the leprosies. And after that, he was on the way to Rome, but he succumbed to tuberculosis. So they took him to a military hospital in Saigon. Saigon is now Ho Chi Minh Ville. And so the surgeon said that, "You know, half of your lungs, the left lung, is really infected by tuberculosis. And so we really have to operate you and take away that left lung and preserve the other one." So after a couple of months in the hospital, came the day of the surgery. And before surgery, the surgeon came and said, "To make sure, we're going to do the last x-ray to make sure how much we can take out or how much the other one has been infected. But the last x-ray shows that he has no sign of tuberculosis at all." And so the surgeon came back 3 hours later and said, "You know, you can go home now. You probably won't grow old and live way after we have died. You don't have tuberculosis anymore. I don't think you have at all, and we can't explain that." And but Francis always had in his mind, maybe Our Lady gives my life for something else, you know. So he kept that in his mind the rest of his life. And so he went to Rome, study, and got his doctorate in canon law. But he said a couple of times when he went to Lourdes for pilgrimage, and he kept hearing the same message that Our Lady said to Saint Bernadette: "I don't promise you happiness on this world, but you will be happy, with me afterwards. And he said, oh, I keep thinking, it can't be for me, a regular priest like me, it could be only for St. Bernadette. But more and more he kept listening to that. It is only when he was in jail that he said, now I understand that message was for me and prepare me for today. So after he became, after Rome, the study, he went back to Vietnam and became a rector of seminary, and then vicar general for the diocese. And when he became vicar general, it was the big coup d'etat in Vietnam in 1963. I'm sure if you follow the Vietnam War, you remember that was a coup d'etat. And our uncle is the president of the First Republic of Vietnam. And as you know from all the media in America, that he was killed along with his brother, assassinated. And it was a very difficult moment for our family. And Francis said that, it was so difficult to forgive. And he had even difficulty hearing confession, because he said, you have to forgive. And if you personally, you have such difficulty forgiving, how could you go and forgive other people and counsel them? And he said it was really a challenge for him. But I think one day, my third uncle was also killed. And so my mother went to the prison to retrieve the body, and on the way out, my mom said to Francis and to all of us, but it didn't dawn on us about thinking about God's way or whatever, because we were young and we were not at that level of holiness to even internalize what mom said at that time, And so mom said to all of us, but I think Francis took it very seriously and started to learn to forgive then, and which prepared the way for him later on to forgive in prison. So mom said to Francis, who are you, or who are we to blame people for not being good to us? Even our God himself was crucified. So who are we to question God? Who are we? And God's way is so much higher than the human way. And so all we have to do is we thank him for giving us opportunity to get closer to the Jesus crucified. And so there is no reason for us to question God. His ways are so much higher than ours. And Francis said, looking at mom being able to see that, and she didn't even talk about forgiveness, she talked about humility and closeness to Jesus crucified. And that really helped him survive the years in prison. And a few years later, he became a bishop of the Diocese of Nha Trang. It's a diocese that has never had a Vietnamese bishop before, so Francis became the first bishop of Nha Trang, and he was then 39 years old, fairly young, in the midst of all the war-torn country. And the Vietnamese bishop elected him to become the president of Episcopal Conference. Is that the right word, Monsignor? It means what? It means to represent all the bishops of the country?
Of that country.
Of that country. So on top of that, he has the added responsibility to take care of all the refugees that were running from the war-torn countries, war-torn from the countryside, because it was heavy bombing, as you recall, extremely heavy bombing. So a lot of refugees came, and so he had to take care of all of them, refugee camps and school for children and counseling services to all of them, including all of the Buddhists or non-Christian, everybody. And he said, when I was in prison, I look back, that was just a good preparation. So you can see the way of God in each of our life, that he has already seen our life from beginning to end. So he prepares you and me, just like he prepared him. So in prison, he had to administer to people, whether they are drug addict or whether they are, Catholic or Buddhist or Taoist or whatever other faith. They were all a family of God. So he has to administer to all that. And so he was doing that and preparing people to coexist when the communists arrived. He already foresaw that the American troops will be pulling out because of the political situation at home, because of all of the, election, and they have to do whatever the people wanted them to do. So they could see, he already foresaw that the troops will be pulling out and the communists will arrive. So he did all kinds of preparation for lay people to replace priests and nuns, because priests and nuns would go to jail anyway. So lay people are the ones who will have to be the educators, the people who continue to bring the faith. And the communist regime saw all of that. On top of that, we came from a family anti-communist and Catholic. So then it's the double whammy, So, and then third thing arrived in 1975, before the communists arrived. Pope Paul VI nominated him as the Archbishop coadjutor of Ho Chi Minh Ville to help the other Archbishop there, because the other Archbishop is fairly old and Francis was still young. And so the communists saw that as, first, he's from an anti-communist family. Second, he has prepared all of his people, the lay people, to take over for the church and on the school, the parish ministers and all that, so he's dangerous. Third, Vatican must have some kind of, a game here to put him there, the biggest diocese of Vietnam, to combat the communists, right? So three things. And on top of that, we have another sad factor. The factor is from the clergy itself. Some members of the clergy, we call them patriotic clergy. You have heard from patriotic priests from China, for example? It means that they cooperate with the government to survive. So those patriotic priests is the fourth factor, and they say, oh yeah, that's right, we're going to be in danger, our diocese, because this archbishop is going to be so strong anti-communist and all that. So we've got to really ask to remove him. So the government take that excuse, your priest don't want you, get out of this diocese. But him being so faithful to the church, he said, no, my Pope puts me here, I'm going to be here until he removes me, but you have no right to remove me. I only obey the Pope. So one day, they said to him and to the Archbishop and to all the priests and religious to come for a meeting in the Opera House of Saigon. And everybody has to go there for a meeting. But when they arrive, they ask the Archbishop to go that way, and they ask Francis to go this way. So everybody else get inside the Opera House, but the two policemen escorted him to the house arrest. And that's how he started the 13 years of his prison life. And that was in August, and he always remembered, it's the Feast of Assumption. And he always said, anything important in my life always happened the Feast of Our Lady, because she protects me. And he said, I remember sitting between the two policemen. They told me to take off my religious habit, the black one. Is that, you call it the sultan? Yeah, the cassock? Yeah, the black one. And I will bring you that one tomorrow, Monsignor, so you can see it's the last time that he wore that before going to jail. And put on the habit of pajamas of the prisoner. And he said, I knew then that I have lost everything, except I only have one thing left, is my faith and the rosary. And it's quite scary when you look back. He said, from Saigon back to Nha Trang on the house arrest is a long, I don't know how many kilometers, 300 kilometers, yeah, about that. And the roads weren't good, like, I mean, from Chicago to Crystal Lake, the road is very good, but it's not like that. And he said at time, they would say, okay, we stop to go to the bathroom, so you go in the forest and do whatever you need. And he kept thinking, they could shoot me from behind, you know, because it's so dark. And when you hear that, you kind of, you know, even now, I'm so, oh my God, was he scared or not? He said, yeah, I was very worried that that was my last moment of my life. And I'm just thinking back, have I been close to God all this time? You know, the last moment is always, what have I been to in my friendship with God, you know? And he said, they stopped a couple of times like that until they reached the house arrest. And in that house arrest, it is next to a parish, next to a church. And the parish priest is a very old priest. He was under Francis. It was his own diocese before. So that priest was his priest before. So the priest said that, okay, they put you on house arrest under my care, so whatever you do wrong, they're going to imprison me too. So make sure you be very careful of what you do inside this room. So Francis said at the beginning, there is that revolt in him, questioning God again. You know, what is it that you're doing to me? I'm one of the youngest bishop here, you know, able and everything, you know, full of himself again. He said, I was so full of myself, I said to him, I'm so able, you know, I have ability, I've got experience, I've got everything, and you put me in this room. And then, so what's happening to your church, you know? And so it is a lot of revolt, a lot of questions and anger. And so one day, he said, in the midst of all that really anxiety and almost like hopelessness, he heard a voice saying, well, hello, think again. Is it God or the work of God? I could replace you by zillions of people out there to do the work that you've been doing for me. There are many people out there way more able than you. So think again, is it God or the work of God that you are thinking right now? And you have been preaching about the word of God. You have read the gospel. Don't you remember what St. Paul did? He was in prison. What did he do? He writes letters to his people. So why can't you do the same? You know? So it really gave him an idea. And so in the morning, early in the morning, there are parishioners who go to church. And at that time, he saw the little boy, he recognized that boy. He knows the parents of that boy. So he signaled that boy over. And by the way, that boy is still alive now in Holland. He's now, 40 something. And he said, tell your mom to give me the own calendar. You know, in Vietnam, we don't have the big calendar like you. We have blocks. And so every day you peel out the olden day calendar blocks. He said, tell your mom to give me the old ones. And then every day I will put under this tree here, under the stone. So you give me, I will pick it up. And then in the morning, you take the one underneath the stone home to your parents. They know exactly what to do. So he wrote on the meditation, which later on were brought out of Vietnam by the boat people, because they recopy and they passed it from community to community. And then finally, they typed it. And the boat people took it out to Vietnam, from Vietnam on their journey as a boat person. And one of them in Australia showed it to my parents, and one of the Australian men who is learning Vietnamese to go to Vietnam, he was able to translate that in English. That was the first translation by an Australian who wanted to go to Vietnam and who had to study Vietnamese. So he was able to read the text and put it into English. And it was only later on that the St. Paul sister and all that do that in a much nicer format. But the first format was a very poorly done, so long as we can just distribute to people. So that was they call it the Gospel from Prison, the Road of Hope. That was the first book. And so he said that he was in such a hurry to finish that because he knows that the moment that the government gets hold of that, his head is really on the platter, right? So, and they did. So they moved him from there into isolation cell. It was a very difficult period of his life. And again, that he thought that he has been already transformed. But in the isolation cell, he rediscovered again what it is to radically forgive. And forgiveness, I think, is such a difficult part in human life, to forgive, you know, especially to forgive someone who does you so much harm, bodily and mentally, and you can't even have a day in court. And so one of the examples that he gave as a time when he had very difficulty forgiving was in the isolation cell. They own the cell, a very small cell without window, is a room within a room and within another room, you know. So there is no air outside, contact with human beings, except that door that opens to give you some food. And he said that the food was very salty most of the time, because if you eat salty food, then you need to drink. And if you drink, and they don't come back to open the cell for you to go and relieve yourself, obviously you're forced to dirty yourself, right? And that is a form to dehumanize you, to make you feel like an animal. So then a few days after that, a female guard, and you know in our Vietnamese culture, the man is so respected, and to be clean and punished and scorned by a woman is really dehumanize you. So he said then a lady guard a woman guard, female guard would come and say, look at you, and you call yourself a bishop, you live like a pig. Look at you, you know, such dirtiness. And you call yourself a bishop, you know, look at you. And you make me clean all your mess, and she would hose you. And day after day, with this kind of treatment, he said that he was not able to really see the face of Jesus in that person. He said it's quite impossible. And as a priest, as a Catholic, as a bishop, you are supposed to see Jesus in your neighbor. And he said he was unable to see that. And he really said, you know, God, I'm really on my knees here, you know. I do not want to die in this state of anger. Could you just help help me. And he said, so one day when that lady came back, and he said, he doesn't know where this strength came, and he looked at her and he said, lady, you and me, we have nothing personally against each other. I don't know you, and you really don't know me. You know, you and I are both Vietnamese from the same country. I know that it is your job to treat me like this. And I feel very sorry that you have to do this dirty job for me. So I ask you, I apologize for giving you this dirty job. And he said the moment that he was able to say that, it is as if the entire load of anger, of all the suffering has disappeared. And even that lady looked at him with a different look. And from then, he said there was much more growth towards closeness to God. And when I was working with my parents in school, I always remember that. And at times, parents come to complain to us about our teachers and all of this, and we could see that sometimes it is so unfair for them to blame A or B and C and D, and they don't recognize part of the mistake of their children too. But then I always remember Francis said, you know, it's a suffering Christ in them and you have to embrace it. And the moment that you realize the suffering Christ in that person in front of you, that God sent to you, the entire burden is gone, and that you are able to see Christ in that person. And it is true. You go and try. It works. And it works for him. It works for many others. It worked for me. For years, I can never forgive the people who created that 1963 coup d'etat and killed most of my family. For years, I never could. At times, I couldn't even go to confession or communion. But when he talks about that, and I was able to see that, yeah, the suffering Christ is in me and also in the other person, and then the burden really disappears, and we get closer to that suffering Christ. If any of you want to try that anytime you have some problem forgiving, try that. I think it's a good medication for ability to forgive. So he went on from that isolation cell near death, but thanks God to Amnesty International, the pressure from the bishop from all over the world, and especially from US, the bishop of US and Australia, who were his friends, his classmates, a lot of pressure from them, and they transferred him to the north in the re-education camp. And I think it is tomorrow we'll talk about the strength of the Eucharist, so I reserve that tomorrow, Monsignor. And after the re-education camp, he was making a lot of conversion, created a lot of conversion among the prisoners. And again, they thought it was highly contagious and dangerous. So they took him out again and put him in high security in the police headquarters in Hanoi, and that was the last few years of his life in prison. And the day he was released is also the feast of Our Lady. 21st of November is at the presentation of Our Lady. And he said he was getting ready to eat his breakfast, and he heard steps running towards him, and telephone ringing and steps running in, and they opened his door and they said, "So, are you done with your breakfast?" He said, "Oh, I'm starting to cook my own breakfast. I'm not ready." He said, "Well, the Minister of Internal Affairs want to see you." He said, "Oh, okay, so get dressed. You can go and see the minister that way, So he got out of those pajamas of re-education camp and prison and put on a shirt that they gave him, went to see the minister. The minister asked him, so, how you've been in prison for a long time? And he said, yes, exactly. How many popes already I've lived under in prison, and how many of, the prime minister in Russia, and look, I'm still in prison. So, and I haven't done anything yet that you could prove that I'm really guilty of anything. You've never given me a day in court and so on. So the minister kind of laughed and said, oh yeah, so what do you want? So my brother said, somebody gave me such a courage, and I said, I want my freedom. So he said, just like that? And he said, yes, just like that, I want my freedom. And he said, when? He said, today. And he said, I never dare to speak like that under them. They really would torture you, you know. But that day, something gave me the courage. I said, right today, I want to be free. And miraculously, the Minister of Internal Affairs said, okay, what are you waiting? He's talking to his secretary, do his papers and release him. And that day he was released, you know, just like that. And he said, the feast of Mary presented in the presentation of Our Lady, 21st of November, 1988. But then he came back to the, they say, you are released, but you are not to go and say Mass to anybody in public. You have to stay in the bishop's house in Hanoi, and you cannot go anywhere else without our permission. So he stayed in the bishop's house, and he applied right away to be a parish priest or to be assistant parish priest anywhere at all, in any remote area. But the government say no, you just stay there. And later on, a year later in 89, they said, why don't you go and visit your parents for a while, you know. Really, you free over here could be a problem, because people knowing that you're free, they come and visit you and so on, and we don't like that. So why don't you just disappear, you know, somewhere. Go and visit your parents, or go in Rome, do something, whatever, but don't come back for a while. So he said, well, I will go and visit my parents, but I would like to come back and work in my own country. So they say, well, okay, go and come back. So he went, visit our parents, went to Rome, but Rome still wanted him back in Vietnam. But back in Vietnam, the government said there is no such thing that you're going to work in Vietnam. You are not a bishop in any capacity, okay? So, and it's going to be dangerous for you too, because if you are starting to do the way you did in prison, to preach and all that, you know, without our permission, then we have to send you back again. And so at that time he was really hesitating, you know, I just want to work in my own country, but now I can't even do that. But I cannot disobey Rome, because Rome wants me here. But after a while, I think Pope John Paul II saw that he could not do anything in Vietnam, so it's better to take him out and use him outside. And so he asked Francis to come out of Vietnam, and he was called to be the president, first the vice president and the president of Justice and Peace until his death. And it was a position that he said was really prepared all the time for him, because he was able to go to Africa, was able to go to the Philippines, not to Vietnam, but Philippines, Korea, go to Tanzania, Mexico, and look at the church in the poor countries and help this poor country becoming, you know, more, in a sense, financially better off, to build more seminaries and to form seminarians and to make more, to build more schools. And he died as a president of Justice and Peace after completing the first draft of the social doctrine of the church, which is really the crowning of his life. Really, he really believed in that social doctrine of the church, because he said in his book, and I always remember that as a teacher, he said, you cannot go and proclaim that God is close to us if you are not close to the people. So you cannot go and preach that God is close to every one of us if you yourself cannot make yourself close to the people that you are responsible of. You know, and as a teacher, that really has guided my life. And so that was the thing that he really believed in, that you have to bring God to every corner of society, and everybody is thirsting of God under one form or the other, under whether they scream out, whether they are drug addict, or whether they this or that, is because of that hungry of the absolute love that they are searching, you know. And so now, tomorrow we speak more about the forgiveness and the strength of the Eucharist in prison, and the way they study the word of life in prison. But today I would like to give you some time if you want to ask any question about the church in Vietnam at this time, or about anything concerning his life or the cause of his beatification, then feel free to ask. Yeah.
Did your parents leave Vietnam? About what time during this process did they leave Vietnam?
I myself left Vietnam in the 60s because I got a scholarship to Australia as a student. But my parents and two of my sisters left Vietnam on the last commercial flight in April 1975. And the Australian government granted them refugee status. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Who was the communist leader when you were in Vietnam?
Pardon me?
Who was the communist leader in Vietnam?
When I was in Vietnam, Vietnam was only communist in the north. Because I left Vietnam in the 60s, but Vietnam became completely communist in 1975. So it was then, the leader is Ho Chi Minh. You're too young to know his name, but you know what? Bravo for the question. Yes.
I've heard reports and seen on TV and so forth.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that the CIA actually was behind the death of President Diem and his brother. Is that true?
Well, you know that after 25 years on the documents, and that is really extremely good of the Constitution of America, is that after 25 years, all the documents have to be, open for people to see. So I was able to go to the Library of Congress. It was really a very difficult moment for me. My brother said to me, and my mother too, said, go and see the truth. And then after that, you can face the truth, because for years I really don't want to look at any picture. It was too gruesome. But anyway, I went there. I remember coming out from the Library of Congress, and one of the men taking care of all these documents asked me, honey, are you okay? So I must have looked awful. And he offered to drive me home, but my cousin picked me up. To answer your question, yes and no, because it was in cooperation with a group of Vietnamese general, eager to get some money too. So I can't blame one without the other. I mean, I can offer drug to you, but you don't need to take it, right? So one offer and the other one cooperate. So there is a cooperation of, as you said. and the Vietnamese general. And at that time, the truth is that my uncle always wanted help from America, but not on these hundreds of thousands of boots on the ground, because our freedom, our people must pay a price for the freedom, not foreigners coming to pay their lives for our own freedom. We need to be taking care of our own land. And we need advisors. We need money because we're poor. We need arms, and we need technology. But I think human beings make mistake. I don't know whether it's out of evil or out of ignorance or out of lack of understanding of the situation, because that was a very, very first war in a foreign country. You know, it's years after that Iraq and Afghanistan, and mistakes are still being made. And so you can't really pinpoint, you only can just state the fact and not put blame or shift the blame on anybody. But it was a war that is resulting in the fact that there is misunderstanding of someone's culture, and also it is really such a different situation for these young American boys to come into this situation and not knowing what are we fighting for, you know. And the communists, knowing all of this, so started to play games, and that's when we lost it. And so there is a misunderstanding that Diem doesn't want to cooperate with American administration. I would never say American people, because American people have helped us tremendously year after year. Even now, it's the administration that made a mistake, and so it resulted in this. And to answer your question, yeah.
President Kennedy, I think they say signed off on it, but he regretted it.
Yeah, he regretted that, and you know, we all make mistakes, and we only could hope that we learn from our mistakes, you know, that not to do something like that in the following years, following war that now is still raging everywhere. But you know, you are invited to go to the Library of Congress, and all of those papers are for the public, and which is so fantastic about American Constitution is that there is that, you know, after 25 years you are able to see where you are if you're still alive, you know. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, yeah.
First of all, thank you for your witness. If Monsignor Hermes becomes the next pope, for sure, he'll canonize him right away. Where are you now? Where are we now in his cause?
Okay.
And are you still waiting for a miracle?
Well, the cause was opened in 2007, and it was officially closed last year in July. And I didn't know Monsignor then. Shame on you for not calling me earlier, because I would have wanted you to go to see, but I will give you the DVD on the ceremony. Great. And you could, closing the cause means that the congregation and the people who examine all the documents understand that, okay, we have enough documents, we have enough testimonies, so now we're going to close it. And now all of these documents will be transferred to the congregation of the saints, and there'll be a medical team and theologians to examine the miracles. There are 3 main miracles so far. One in Denver, Colorado, seminarian who was a Vietnamese seminarian. I think he had some kind of a bad flu, the bird flu or the pig flu or one of those, you know. Anyway, he was in comatose for for 33 days or 36 days. And one day, somebody called me from Denver, Colorado, and said that the whole parish is praying for Seminarian Hui, and that we are asking through the intercession of your brother. So could you please get on the internet and tell everybody, in the foundation of Thuan to pray and pray. So that's all we did. And then 33 something days after, somebody from Denver called me and said, this is a number, could you call this number? And I said, whose number am I calling here, And they said, call the hospital. And I thought he had died. I didn't know who it was. So I called, and it was him who answered. So he said, yes, I'm healthy, and I'm going back to university. And so they call that as number one miracle. The second one is a sister from the order of the Lovers of the Cross. You've heard that order? It's an order that is founded by a French missionary in Vietnam, Lovers of the Cross. And Vietnamese we call Men Thanh Gia. Yeah. And so she had some kind of illness and lost her eyesight. And she said she had prayed God through the intercession of Francis, and the day she went into surgery, she held onto that prayer card that I had many copies there for you, and she said in the surgery room, she saw her name on the blood bag, for transfusion, and she saw her name. So then she said to the doctor, oh, is that for me? And the doctor said, why do you say that? She said, I saw my name. And he said, so you can read? You can see? And so she went to Rome last year to give that testimony. So that is a very strong one too. And the third one, they call it the miracle of faith, because one of his former guard, who a high-ranking police officer in the communist regime, came to see him when he was at the headquarters of the police, when he was arrested there, and said, I would like to learn foreign languages with you so that it helps me in my job. So Francis said, okay, so he taught him French and English and so on. And that man, in his testimony, he said that friendship really made him think that only those who believe in the love of God could have that kind of friendship. And he became Catholic. He retired from the police force, and now he is now one who writes for the Catholic newspaper. So the Vatican calls that the miracle of faith, And he couldn't come to give testimony, but he gave a written testimony and stamped by Father Thuy, that yeah. And he was not allowed to go to Rome to give testimony, but he did give a written testimony and officially stamped. So you asked me what is going on. So we went there. Pope Francis came to bless all the pilgrims who came for that ceremony, and he said that your joy is also my joy, and I'm really hoping that this cause will come to a happy conclusion soon. And so we just went home and waiting for the postulator. You know what is a postulator? The postulator is just like a lawyer working on your behalf, right? So the postulator is now writing a long thesis to convince the congregation of the saints that this man should be canonized. So that's the postulator's role. So the postulator now is working with another man from the congregation of the saints, and the two of them are combining their effort to write a long thesis to promote the life of this man. And the medical team at this time is examining the miracle and the report from the doctors. But when Pope Francis became Pope, he went from department to department to meet the people in different departments. And I was told by a person who knows very well these people, said that when he came to the congregation of the saint, and he was asking about the different causes, and he really wished that they would work very efficiently and quickly for the cause of Francis. So that really brings a lot of hope, and we pray that he lives a long time, this Pope. Yeah, so that's...
See, I don't need to be Pope after all. It's way
but you can make it faster, Monsignor. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Elizabeth, are you going to do it tomorrow night where talk about the witnesses, the Vietnamese communists that came before they...
Yeah, you want me to do that too tomorrow?
Whenever you think it'd be best.
Well, I can do now if you like.
Fascinating that the witnesses, the Vietnamese communists who were his prisoners who went to Rome for... Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah. So anyway, when they officially opened the cause, we were able to fundraise to buy air tickets and exit visa and all of this for 3 people who guarded him when he was in prison. 2 who guarded him as he was in house arrest, and 1 who guarded him when he was in the police headquarters. So 3 of them kept. Now, I took them to the Council of Justice and Peace to introduce them to the African Cardinal who replaced Francis. He now is the President of Justice and Peace. So I took them over there to introduce them. So the Cardinal, at that meeting, he said, "So, I'm so happy that you are here, and could you tell me a little more about the days that you spent with my big brother," the Cardinal called. And they hesitated for a while. They kind of, at first they looked at us as if, I don't know whether these people hate us because we were the one who's supposed to torture him and all that. I'm wondering whether his sister looks at me with some kind of anger or something, you know. So there is that difficult moment initially. Right? And so they were quiet for a while, and then at the end they said, well, what we remember most is that we really understand that Jesus is for real. And you're talking about communists here, you know, that Jesus is for real, because if he didn't exist, he didn't teach these people how to love one another, I don't think this man would have loved us the way he did. So it was like silence. The Cardinal is silent, the rest of us was silently in shame, because we, in this free world, we never could testify like that, because we take it so much for granted. Oh, well, Jesus exists, you know, I mean, you know, there's no way else to describe it. But that's the way they say. They say Jesus is for real. If he did not exist, if he didn't die like this man said, if he didn't love his people the way he did, then this man would never learn to love people like us, like he loved us. So it was, the Cardinal thought it was the best testimony he's heard. And then in their written testimony, one of them say like this, and I just said it to you at dinner time. He said that in Hanoi, in the prison cell, it's extremely cold. In Hanoi, it's very cold, especially in the winter when it rains, it's damp, and you don't have central heating, you don't have anything, you know, it's very cold. And the floor, what they slept on, is cement. And they just put a mat, you know, those You know those mats that you buy in dollar store, those. And so he said that we were guarding him day and night, so therefore we have to sleep in there to guard him too. And he said, so we slept on the floor, and my blanket is very long, covers my entire body, but is very thin. And his blanket that your family sent to him is pure wool, and he washed it, so it shrunk. So it became very short. It's thick and warm, but short. So it cannot cover the entire body. So then one night, we were really trembling because of this cold weather. So he said to me, he said, why don't you move closer to me? My warm blanket can cover my chest and your chest, and your thin blanket can cover the rest of our legs and body. But our chest is where we felt the most cold. And that prison guard said, you know, this is a man who trusted me, who didn't care whether I'd strangle him at night or I'd do anything to him at night. He just simply trusted in the human being and helped each other in times of need, you know. And this is such a simple thing, but it gives us that kind of courage that maybe for us too, in real life, if we pass by somebody who just dropped a handkerchief or something and we picked it up, and maybe even a simple gesture of kindness, civility, really can convert people, you know. And it gives us that kind of hope and encouragement. And he said that I never could understand why that he trusted me that way, because up to then I didn't talk to him. I answered by yes or no. I never was courteous. But that really opened my mind and make me closer and understand the way he believed and preached his religion. Whatever it is there, he said, all comes down to one word: love one another, you know. And he wrote that beautifully in his testimony. And that's one of that testimony. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Isn't she wonderful? Huh?
I'm considered.
We've got a lot more stories to tell. So tomorrow night is the Eucharist, but you know, the Eucharist is such a huge part in Cardinal Thuan's life. So it's kind of the Eucharist. A lot more wonderful stories tomorrow night. A brief little thank you. Rich and Monica are there with different books about and by the Cardinal Thuan. But also we have his own books that he wrote. These are, Elizabeth brought these for us. These are only $5. And he wrote these 5 loaves and 2 fish. And they're available also afterward for $5. I think, because you guys, are the seminaries going to be able to come tomorrow night or not? Or is this like...
I'm going to come tomorrow.
What do you think? Okay, because I don't know, should we, we'd like to hear your recent picture about Vietnam and the church in Vietnam. Are we going to do that for a few minutes now or tomorrow night? Or